I tell people we took the stairs, we didn't take the elevator. I think it's very popular nowadays to want to take the elevator, right? Because you want to go straight to the penthouse in a couple minutes. Who doesn't? Like taking the stairs is tedious, but you learn and you're able to actually become stronger, right? And build a real business. Do not let the expectations or the, responsibilities of family and community crush who you really are, because you don't get to do life again, and you don't get to reset those expectations once you're, in your 20s and 30s. It just becomes really hard. So
hey everyone, welcome to the Limitless Grit Podcast. In today's episode, we have Ani Sanyal. He is the co-founder of Kolkata Chai Co, and also he is a serial entrepreneur. His mission is to bring the authentic taste of Indian chai to people in the States and eventually around the world. It was such a fun conversation, and without further ado, Ani.
Yeah, hey Ani, thanks for taking the time. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
thank you guys. No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So you mentioned you spent most of your life in New York, and you grew up in USA to immigrant parents. You also had a few companies. Could you walk us through your entrepreneurial journey before you started Kolkata Chai Company?
Yeah, I think my entrepreneurial journey started very young. Being a eldest son of first generation parents, you go through all of the, difficulties of kind of finding the American dream, if you will. And for my family, there was a lot of financial insecurity and, watching my father get laid off and kind of always having this massive insecurity around work and, providing. And so for me, I think I was 12, 14 years old, where I was like, I know I'm never going to work for somebody else. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I just knew, it wasn't going to be me. And so that was a difficult, journey to just explain to my parents that there's no chance I'll ever be a doctor or a lawyer or a banker, because it just doesn't philosophically align with who I am and what I believe in, and something that's been in my spirit since I was a child. I was your quintessential lemonade stand kid. So I would, literally have lemonade stands when I was younger. The first business that I started was a independent record label when I was 16 years old with a friend of mine in high school. And we would create and produce music. We would distribute it on iTunes. We would produce merch. We would sell CDs, and, we would build this kind of independent music operation, if you will. And I spent the first 10 years of my quote unquote, adult life from 16 to 26 fully immersed in that business. And so that business took me around the world. I lived in Tokyo. I was on tour as an artist in Japan. I got to score a Bollywood film and lived in India for months and weeks touring and working with producers and people there. I, toured the US. I worked with a lot of artists before they became, kind of big artists like Wiz Khalifa and Lupe Fiasco and all these other artists, and made very little money for 10 years because the music industry is very kind of exploitive. And more importantly, we just, we weren't a big enough operation to, really have that be a financially viable thing for me. But that's where I learned creativity. That's where I learned, the power of content, how to build community. And really the most important thing I learned in those 10 years was taking an idea and bringing it to life, and knowing kind of all the ups and downs that it takes as an entrepreneur to do that. I used to have these experiences where we would write songs in this tiny little, bedroom in Bushwick, and, there's mice running around, and you're paying, $500 a month each in rent, and it's nasty, right? And then 6 months later, you're in Japan and you're performing this song that you recorded in this crazy Bushwick apartment. And that to me was the most powerful feeling, And so, I chased that for a long time. I met a lot of great people. I manage an artist named Anik Khan today, and Anik I met through, music and that side of town. And so, I transitioned out of music in my mid-20s, and my brother and I started a marketing and creative agency. And this was, again, kind of taking the things that we knew and understood from culture. So whether it was music, whether it was art, whether it was, literature, and just the things that we were into. How do you help businesses kind of modernize and adapt to the digital age, right? So telling stories online, customer acquisition, growth, paid media, these were all the things that we would touch. And then through that process, we realized that there was very few, literally no brands at that time. This is 2016, 17, 18. There were no brands that were speaking to any type of audience that wasn't your kind of high earning millennial audience. Everything looked the same, and I don't want to name names to knock on these companies. These are multi-million-dollar companies, but Away luggage or, this brand or that brand, like it all looked the same, and so my brother and I really had a hunch that there was an opportunity to do something outside of like the traditional kind of venture backed, mass market thing. And, chai was something that came very organically, to us. My brother spent a month traveling India and he was like, I'm going to tea estates, and he was kind of on his own random trip, which, that's very much who he is. He's the artist, he's the creative guy, he's the chef. He's all the way out there, and then I'm a lot more, type A, just making sure things get done, and that's our dynamic. But Kolkata Chai was born out of my brother's kind of, creative pursuit. Started with him making chai for his roommates. We then made chai for 15, 20 people at a little private, kitchen in Brooklyn, and then that turned into farmers markets, into pop-up shops, into our first retail store in 2019. And this is a very long intro to say today I sell chai full time, which is something that my parents still are very confused about, but they are starting to understand the power of what we're doing.
There's so much to unpack, and I'll definitely get back to chai, but I want to talk about your career trajectory. So you were writing music in Bushwick. Actually, I used to live right next to Bushwick in Myrtle Ave. And from Bushwick to like go to Japan, live in India, work with people in Bollywood, to creating a marketing agency. And something that really fascinated me was when I was researching you, I saw that you also had some big clients like Hillary Clinton and other big names. So I wanted to understand first, how did you learn marketing, like 101? And second, how were you able to get clients?
Yeah, it's a great question. I went to NYU for finance and economics. That was my degree, quote unquote. Didn't spend a lot of time at NYU doing either of those things. I was in New York City, just learning what really moves people, what moves culture, meaning, I remember waiting in line to get a signed CD from Kanye West in like 2017 or something. I remember standing outside for sneaker drops. I remember, freestyling in ciphers in Washington Square Park. I mean, all these things that, to me, I'm answering the question, I'll get there in a second. To me, I've always been obsessed with kind of what moves consumerism, like what moves people to actually want to buy something. Growing up, didn't have a lot. I remember, Nike, like Jordans, Vans sneakers, or just these iconic, Levi jeans, these things that we grew up with, starter jackets, whatever. They just seem so unattainable, right? There were hundreds of dollars, and at that time that was completely out of the question. But I remember that feeling of like, why do I want this so bad? And I think that kind of led me to do a lot of just real world kind of learning around what makes brands powerful. And so I've been obsessed with studying, whether it's an artist, whether it's a brand, whether it's a collaboration. I'm a sneakerhead. I've been collecting sneakers since I was 14 years old. And like, why? Why does an adult man need 150 pairs of sneakers? He probably doesn't, right? But there's this thing about it. It's a form of self-expression. It's a creative outlet. It's the way colors and the way stance and all these things essentially that I've just been obsessed with for a very long time. So I think when answering the question how I learned marketing, I think it was just being a sponge and being obsessed with figuring out the why behind all these things that kind of moved popular culture. And I think when you do that, you start to understand, you guys have probably been through this before, you'll discover an artist before everyone else does. You'll discover a brand before everyone else does. And it's like, how many times can you do that before you start to understand, like, maybe I actually have a knack at this thing that I'm, kind of informally studying. And so for me, it was just like being a sponge and then executing things that were way outside of my weight class, for example. I was the first person that brought Wiz Khalifa to do a show in New York City. And to this
Wow.
day, him and his manager and I, like, when someone brings it up, like, it's still a thing that they're like, oh yeah, Ani did that. But that didn't happen because I had any experience or whatever. I just knew that he was a, rising artist. I knew there was people every day I talked to that loved his music. And I knew that no one in New York was like willing to bring him here because the promoters were all focused on whatever EDM act or whatever, getting off topic. But the idea of like just being obsessed with and then taking big swings at trying to do things based on your knowledge and having the confidence to know, like, I might screw this up, but I'm going to really, really work hard to put it all together and bring the right people in and just like, I will not fail at doing this one thing. I think when you do that multiple times, you start to stack, bricks, so to speak. And the second question of kind of how we got clients, I'm going to try to keep this answer short. Getting clients and kind of being a new, agency or company is a very difficult task. I think for me, we used to always try to create work, for our existing clients or just the things that we were doing. We always said, hey, let's create a certain excellence for the work that we do so that if people do talk about it or people are kind of sharing it, it becomes its own kind of sales vehicle. And that's really tough when you're an agency model because you're working with so many clients and just volume is a part of your, how you stay alive. But it was really that. It was like putting out some campaigns and some, having some of those hits, so to speak, that ended up getting the right, the attention of people. And so I remember some work that I did with some artists led to me getting connected to the Asian American super PAC that was responsible for a lot of Hillary Clinton and 2016 election stuff. And then they ended up hiring our agency to run her entire kind of Asian American outreach. And so I just remember that was one of the craziest, experiences of my life. But it just came out of just doing the best work you can without cutting corners and without having expectations and just really trying to, set the bar higher every time.
So with your marketing agency, right, when you first started off, like, were you helping them with videos for social media or managing their pages? Like, what were the parts of marketing that you were focused on when you first started?
Yeah, tactically, we were helping companies acquire more customers or users or whatever their KPI was. How we did that was a combination of creating content, whether it was video, photo, graphics, whatever, like understanding what type of content would move the needle for them. And then in certain instances, creating campaigns. So if it was, an activation or some type of celebrity partnership or whatever it was, again, finding ways to reach new audiences and reach new customers. And then the last part of it being paid media, driving marketing and advertising dollars behind the content and the campaigns to acquire and to bring in sales.
Interesting. So like you use the dollars at the end, but you use the other marketing channels early on.
That's correct. Yeah.
And then used the dollars to drive those graphics or content to then eventually acquire the customers.
Yep. I think a lot of people try to do it the other way around or just really rely on advertising and marketing dollars to move the needle. And I think, even with Kolkata Chai, a big part of our advantage has just been always kind of investing in organic community and organic content and, just keeping things like simple, human to human. How can you, give someone something to talk about? Because if you do that and you keep doing that, it's going to grow. And I think a lot of brands skip those steps and just say, hey, I'm going to go straight to spending, $100,000 a month on Facebook. And it's like, well, there's a lot of context that you should create before you do something like that.
Totally. You brought up really good points that we want to unpack one after the other. I mean, I grew up in Mumbai, and just like every other household in India, I also grew up with the smell of freshly brewed chai every morning. And that's something I missed when I came to America. I couldn't find chai on the streets. Let's say if you walk in Manhattan, every other block has a coffee shop. It's very easy to find bubble tea as well, but it's difficult to find chai and good chai. So definitely I'm a customer, but how did you start from the ideation to having pop-ups to then eventually opening a store in Manhattan?
Yeah, I think the point that you mentioned is exactly the genesis for us as well. You grow up with something that is so important to your narrative and you come to the most, epic city in the world and you can't find it. That there's got to be something, that you could solve there. So in terms of tactically building the business, what we did was we would use social media to create kind of interest and tell stories around chai, and then have a physical activation to bring people to that place. And then during those activations, whether it was a farmer's market or a pop-up or whatever it was, we would have, like a photographer going around and taking photos and essentially giving people like a chance to see themselves in a way that they felt comfortable in, with something that was from their culture where they could feel proud about it. But it wasn't like, it wasn't like to go drink chai, you have to like wear a full like Punjabi and kurta set and like, oh, I'm Indian and I'm drinking chai. It wasn't like this like over sensationalization of that, right? It was like, hey, you can dress how you're dressed and come as you are. And chai can be a part of the routine the same way you mentioned bubble tea is or third wave coffee is. And it was really kind of modernizing and normalizing something that, when we grew up on that side of the world, is every day for us. And so we started really small. And I think one thing that I can look back on now and I can laugh about it, it wasn't necessarily as discernible when it was happening, is that we started small without any expectations of building a unicorn or anything silly like that. It was like, hey, if we go serve 100 people next week at a pop-up, can we make sure that everyone loves the chai? Can we make sure that we can, capture some content from it? Can we make sure that we can have people share and talk about it? Like, it was just very small milestones. And those 100 people that we said, all right, well, we did 100. Can we do 300? And can we do 500 people? And it was these kind of tangible, small scale, unscalable things that we just did for 18 months, really, before we realized there's really a big audience here and we should explore, what retail could be. But I think that's my perspective now that I can have, because we took, I tell people we took the stairs, we didn't take the elevator. I think it's very popular nowadays to want to take the elevator, right? Because you want to go straight to the penthouse in a couple minutes. Who doesn't? Like, of course, we all want that. Taking the stairs is tedious, but you learn and you're able to actually become stronger, right? And build a real business. And so, and on the other side of that, I think there's so much luck and kind of fortune and all of that involved in these kind of things where, yeah, I mean, a lot of people were probably serving chai and pop-ups at some point, and like they couldn't build it into what we built, right? So there's an element of luck and just timing involved that I have to acknowledge, but we were very deliberate and very slow in the first year and change of the business.
I really like the point that you mentioned that you were taking the stairs and not the elevator. And what I wanted to understand is, like, even with your marketing business, you had mentioned that before you put in the dollars, you have to build a community. And what you master, I feel, is building that community. And with Kolkata Chai, like when you opened the physical store, you guys had around 1,000 people lined up to get the chai. And something that we struggle with, and a lot of people who are starting a business struggle with, is building that community. So how can one build a community? Like, what are the steps they can take to build a community like you have built over and over?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of, brands and kind of both startups and incumbent brands are trying to figure this out right now. I think community building with the expectation that you're going to eventually sell something to the people is not the right way to do it. And I think that's the lowest hanging fruit, right? Oh, I'm going to build community. I'm going to have pizza and beer night, and people are going to come and I'm going to pitch them a SaaS product after. Like, all right, well, no wonder that community didn't take off. It wasn't really that authentic to begin with. And so for us, that was the first thing. Was building community meant doing something with no expectation or no ROI. And that's really, really tough to do, especially at scale. But that's what we did. What that means is, offering free chai at pop-ups, we had to incur all those costs. But then also you're having a content team running around and, kind of like creating these moments from your pop-ups, and you also have to incur that cost. And it was just like, how do we make people proud of where they're from and just kind of feel good about themselves without any expectation. I think that was step one. And then how we scaled that community, I think, was by constantly listening to what people want and then figuring out how to deliver that with a high level of taste. I think the thing about taste gets lost, especially kind of in first generation immigrant businesses, or just, people. Basically, we are always in a rush to kind of scale or move fast instead of moving tastefully and doing things that people actually want to see. So, recently we launched a gulab jamun, latte, and we tapped Sirat Saini, who's a, pretty popular influencer and creator, to be the face of that. And then, we brought in a creative director and all these, photographer, and it was just a very tasteful campaign. But it was for one small drink. It was almost like we knew that there was more power in the community being like, wow, I've actually never seen like a gulab jamun like latte be turned into something that's tasteful and cool. Like, this is fun. This makes me feel excited to be South Asian or to be immigrant or to be whatever. Oh, and this brand Kolkata Chai did it. Cool. I don't know anything about them. Let me learn a little bit more about them. That was the only expectation. I wasn't going to sell enough gulab jamun lattes to pay for the investment on that campaign. But I think that's what community is. It's giving people a mirror to see themselves in an authentic way without any expectation of selling something to them, down the road.
If you don't mind sharing, how much did you invest in that campaign?
Great question. That campaign was probably between 7 and 10,000.
Okay.
Okay.
And that was, from your perspective, just to create curiosity.
You got
like, for people to just want to learn more about what it is, not even like with an expectation that I want them to buy it.
Curiosity and excitement. Yeah. Again, for the community. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Early on, you mentioned that the taste in restaurants that are driven by the first generation immigrants is kind of lost because they're probably more in the survival zone, and being there is tough to be creative. So how did you iterate on the taste?
It's a great question. So I think, taste is funny because it's the way your food tastes. And then there's also the tastefulness of the brand and kind of that side. So I'm not the chef. My brother is. I'm not going to speak on the taste of the product, but I can speak on the tastefulness of the brand. I think the first thing that we did was we didn't set out to build a South Asian brand or something that was just for brown people. That felt limiting. That felt also doing a disservice to the culture, because if new people don't discover a product or, a service, and it just stays within the same community, then that's not really pushing your culture forward. That's just kind of, doing the same things in different ways. And so the first thing we did from a taste level was allowing ourselves to be honest about the things we were influenced by. So my brother and I, just a very, I think, wide range of influences. Yeah, sure. We grew up with Bollywood music in the house, but, we are big hip hop fans. I grew up playing and watching a ton of sports. My brother and I are both fairly, into, just like fashion and streetwear and understanding, clothing. And obviously I'm a sneakerhead. And so, and then, we're both voracious readers, and, our father, kind of set the tone for what intellectual, consumption kind of looks like. And so I say that to say we have a wide range of taste ourselves. And I think we were not shy to kind of let that shine in the brand, and let that kind of be part of driving the taste. So if you walk into, a Kolkata Chai cafe, you'll see, cassette tapes of Dil Se or whatever. Those are my childhood cassette tapes. Like, those are the ones that I bought when I had a cassette player and had to rewind it with a pencil. Like, those are just moments that, were important to us, that we felt like, hey, this is going to be something that other people can relate to. That's not the same, and no offense to anybody, but tiger painting on the wall, or how now there's like every trendy Indian restaurant you go to, there's like a sultry, Bollywood actress type
Yep.
on the wall. It's like, it's just like, that's not even like, we go to India and we don't even see that there. Like, that's not even a thing that we do. Why would we do that here? Like, that, it's just, it doesn't feel tasteful. It feels cheap. And I think for us, it was just like, stay away from that at all costs. There's a very poignant piece that my brother wrote on our first blog post ever, which was basically like, he was like, do not put an old Indian man in glasses and like in sunglasses and just be like, this is like modern Indian cuisine, like that. And that's a lot what a lot of people were doing in New York at that time too, with all due respect. And so I think so my point is, you can't do the thing that's the most obvious and in front of you because everyone's doing that. Again, you have to think about what's the next level, but also be open to being, hey, what are my influences? What are the influences that are in my community, in my group? How do I broaden the scope of what we're doing? And so I think today, if you were to sit outside of Kolkata Chai for 10 minutes and study the foot traffic, it would be 50-50 between, South Asian folks and non-South Asian people. And I think that's really important to me because that shows that we've widened, the spectrum of who feels comfortable relating to the brand. It's not always about just speaking to the same people all the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. And we notice that we go there often and like, you're absolutely right.
I appreciate that. See, I'm not lying for all the podders out there.
I want to talk about marketing. I think you guys do a great job knowing, I don't know if it's like knowingly or unknowingly, but you've been mentioned in Fox News, New York Times, and I see Mindy Kaling like loving Kolkata Chai. I see Hassan Minaj and all these incredible people who we like look up to in our society, like love your product and they rave about your product. So I wanted to ask, like, how did you get that level of marketing?
Great question. We have never had a publicist on staff, really ever, maybe like for 1 or 2 or 3 months. So a lot of the things that you see, and I'm really proud when I say this, is like, it's all organic. I think that's easy to say. People are like, well, like, what does that mean? Like, I want to do it organically. How do I do it? I think there's a couple parts of that. Let me try to get to it as efficiently as possible. I think for marketing, the first thing that we do is we're storytellers. I think that is, to me, that's what marketing is. And I think, again, a lot of people skip that step nowadays. And so the first thing is always, what story are we telling? What is compelling to our audience? What do people want to hear? What's authentic to us, but also relatable? It's all about the story. I think that's the first thing.
I gotta ask you one more question on that. How do you become a storyteller? How did you guys become a great storytellers?
I think it's such a good question, but it's so tough for me to say definitively. But for me, I can say it was by studying other storytellers, and consuming stories. So, hip hop music for me was a huge North Star. There's a lot of stories in rap that, whether it's a Jay-Z or a Nas or a J. Cole or whatever, like, you're learning. I tell people all the time, it's like, tell me all that you know about, XYZ artist. And they'll tell you their whole, biography. And you're like, how did you know that? And they're like, oh, I just listened to the music. Like, artists are such great storytellers that it's almost like implicit in what they do. I read a lot. I've always been, since childhood, I would, like elementary school, I was just in the library all summer like a nerd. I enjoy it. I love reading and learning stories. And I think you absorb and study things, and then you find out how to, you internalize it and you replicate it in your own kind of way. I think that's the simplest answer. I think especially, for first generation kids and just people, in our kind of community, those things are soft skills that are not praised or kind of valued, that you can't, go to a Goldman Sachs interview and tell them you're a great storyteller. Like, they'll get you, they'll get you out of there sooner than you could finish your story. And so, I think that's one thing that is maybe part of the thing, is like, people don't really take the time to, learn how to be good storytellers, or actually like be vulnerable enough to say like, hey, I want to learn how to tell stories. Like, this is what I'm going to do. My dad, quintessential, Bengali father, and used to literally, slap my brother and I upside the head when we would get our math wrong. And like, he was just like uncompromising on math and science and hard skills being the way. And, I tried my best. And then at some point I was like, yeah, that's not who I am. I'm sorry. Like, this is just not what I know how to do. And, I had to show and prove, that I knew what I was doing. But tangentially, I I think it's important if you feel that like, hey, this is what I know how to do, or I want to tell stories, like you got to commit to it. So I think marketing is storytelling at the core. The second thing is content. I think there's no excuse not to learn how to leverage content in today's, kind of like overwhelming, but available, world. It's like, I've met so many people or artists or this or that who are like, oh, I don't want to put out my content. I'm scared, or it's not there yet. And it's not there yet. Yeah. And it becomes 2-3 years and it was never there and you missed your window. I think volume, putting out things, iterating, learning what's working, studying trends, these things are all, we can do it if we like, all the information's out there. But I think we were uncompromising with content. I think if you go through our YouTube, we launched like a mini documentary on YouTube around the opening of the first cafe. Like who does that? Like big restaurant groups with billions of dollars don't do that. Right. So it was just like really being, again, that was a story, right, that we were telling, but using, content and long form, short form, this, that, whatever, just being uncompromising and making sure that, you're prioritizing that as a business. So storytelling, content. And I think the third thing is listening to your audience and kind of being humble enough to know that there are things you don't know or that things people want to see. And, like you have to figure out how to integrate that into the stories that you're telling. I think that's the key thing is we never assumed that we knew everything or that we weren't able to take feedback. I think we've just always been really open. And that's, I think, what makes a good marketer.
Do you have a few examples of feedback that you received from customers and you iterated on?
Customer feedback is also tough because people will tell you everyone has every opinion in the world, right? So you have to kind of distill the ones that are actually meaningful. What we tend to do is, anecdotally or just even on our customer service team, like we'll keep a log of like, hey, which inquiries or which things are coming up the most often, and then do those deserve an exploration or, some type of further development. I'll give one piece of, feedback around this that we've done is when we were first launching our DIY, the chai mix that we have for people to make at home. There was a lot of early kind of like, hey, how do I use this? Do I need a French press or can I do it in a microwave and all this wild stuff that sure, like the average consumer does not know how to make chai. And, if you go to our website today, you'll see, chai making guide and there's gifts and videos and you can either learn how to do it in 3 seconds or you can watch a 10-minute video and do it. But it's like we understood that education and educating the customer was the most important thing to be able to scale the usage of the product. And so we invested a ton in like shooting videos and, making it fun and movement and all these different things in that one web page so that people feel like, okay, I can make chai and I don't need to be, from Bombay to do it. I can be from Minnesota, and like there's a calculator in there. You can type in how many cups do you want to make and it'll tell you how many, gallons of milk you need, how many teaspoons of chai. And it's like, we're just thinking about the people who are making this and like where they're coming from. So that was one piece of, kind of iterative marketing that we did. I'm trying to think of what else we can. That's a good one to use for now.
That's a good one.
With your e-commerce business, right? First, you had a physical store. Did you guys decide to pivot to e-commerce because of COVID, or what made you want to pivot to a completely different industry?
For the record, we launched our first cafe. We did have an e-commerce operation from day one, but it was like merch and t-shirts and mugs, and it was like the unofficial side of it. But we knew that, we wanted to build an omni-channel business from the beginning. So we wanted to have multiple ways of, capturing revenue. But to your point, it was definitely COVID that accelerated the need for the product to really, be the core focus of the business. And then today, about 80 to 85% of our revenue comes from e-commerce versus brick and mortar. So it's the predominant kind of part of the business. And I think, again, how is the world moving in terms of consumption and, how are we, consuming things, like how study your own behavior, but then also learning that Kolkata Chai as a brand meant so much to so many people, but if it's only in New York, then it doesn't we can't reach those people. And as a byproduct, you can't capture that revenue. So, getting e-commerce right, figuring out our direct to consumer operation has been, my, headache and my part of the business for the last 4 years. And I think this year we're finally, we're moving. I mean, we're moving, in a way that we're building a really significant business on that side.
That's really impressive. So 85% of your revenue is from e-commerce.
Yeah.
If you take a few steps backwards, you had a pop-up store before you had the physical store in Manhattan. Were you profitable at that point with the pop-up stores?
The pop-ups were always profitable because those were created in a way where it was very hard to lose money, meaning you'd only be there for a certain amount of hours. So, you're going to be able to kind of cap. It's not, you don't have rent. So your OPEX and your CAPEX is fairly, within reason. And, so yeah, those were always profitable, by a lot, probably not, 5 to 10% margin you're eking out. But, yeah, we didn't have enough money where we could lose, on those type of things. So yeah, we always built those to be efficient.
So did you also have like an option to, scale the pop-ups as opposed to buying or rather renting a physical store? Because physical store has more liabilities.
At that time, I think I don't think my brother and I were we just weren't that aware of like what the business could be, meaning could we have done a chai truck and traveled around the country and minimized our OPEX and CAPEX? Probably.
But created I think content.
Right, exactly. I think that would have been a very viable business model. I think what we knew is that in order for chai to have its moment in this country, you needed to have it be experienced in a physical location. And that wouldn't have been possible with a truck or, with a pop-up. Every pop-up we went to, we'd have to put up our own decor and this and that. And, there's only so many times you're going to do that till you're exhausted of it. So having that cafe location, and then to your point about, opening night when there's 800,000-900,000 people outside, like people are going to talk about that, and that probably has more impact downstream than, if you're in a different city every night. So, I think my brother and I were probably not as mature from a business modeling standpoint at that time. And if we had known what we know today, like maybe we would have done 3-month pop-ups in, core markets for the first couple of years and built it out that way. But again, I think luck and fortune, with that first location ended up being the right decision.
Yeah, my next question was like, if you could give yourself one advice on business with everything you know now, to like a 15, 20-year-old you, like what advice would you give?
Wow. The advice would be to pay more attention to what's happening behind the business, meaning in your P&L and what's the actual kind of financial strength of your business, and not so much on the outward appearance of the business, meaning the marketing and the likes and the, all of that is like incredible and it's important. But I think as a young entrepreneur, a young business person, you need to make sure you understand the back of house, if you will, right? What's happening on a P&L, what's your balance sheet? Those are the unsexy things that I never wanted to, learn. And now my life is, almost like 50-50 that and marketing. So it's something that I wish I would have been more aware of earlier.
So I get so many advertisements from Kolkata Chai on my Instagram, and I think you guys are doing a great job on like how you are advertising. And I wanted to ask, like, what percentage of your revenue do you guys spend on advertising?
That's a great question. I can say it's in the range of 20 to 40%. So I can give that range. And that's across the whole business. So that's like brick and mortar, e-commerce, wholesale, everything. But we spend about between 20 and 40%.
So what is your goal with the business? Do you want to, scale it to having multiple locations, want to find an exit, or scale the e-commerce?
Yeah, great question. I think the North Star for us is to become the household name for chai in the Western world. That's what that's what we're building for. If that requires more locations, then we'll invest in that. If that requires being on grocery shelves, we'll invest in that. Right now, we're aiming to do that by laying the foundation, through direct to consumer and really making sure, the maximum number of households in this country do get to experience Kolkata chai. And then we'll, evolve and kind of iterate based on what we see there. But yeah, I think our goal is to own that conversation around chai.
So when you got when you rented the store, up until that point, and even right now, did you bootstrap the company or you took external funding?
Yeah. So from 2018, which was the inception of KCC, to the end of 2021, we bootstrapped the entire kind of operation, which was very stressful. And I don't know if I would do it again, but we basically took the money that we had saved from our agency, business, and literally just transferred money from that one account into, our landlord's account to open that first location. And then, built a profitable business on a month-to-month, schedule to keep the lights on. It was very lean. There was really no ability to scale that because there wasn't enough capital to grow and to do anything with. We were just kind of stuck, inch by inch, month by month, day by day, surviving. And we were building brand and doing fun things outside of it, right? But it wasn't like there was no chance of being a household name. It was very much, just being a neighborhood thing. At the end of 2021, we raised our first round of funding. So I raised at that time it was 1 million total. And we raised a little bit after that, but to date we've raised around $1 million total. And we have never raised a Series A or anything like that. It's just been one round.
So for people who might be starting, right? I think getting money from a VC is such a cool word and people like the idea of raising money, but what were like the pros and like what is the positives of raising money and what is like some of the drawbacks of like raising money?
Yeah, great question. So I'll clarify for us. We have never raised venture capital. So we've raised from angels. We've raised debt product. We have debt on the business, but we've never raised from venture capital. So and that was a very deliberate decision. So to answer the question, I think the pros and cons of fundraising are, at the surface level, you're bringing capital in and you are essentially giving away a piece of your company in the process. And so the obvious con there is, if you keep raising money and you keep giving away parts of your company, then at some point, the equity left is either going to be, significantly diminished or it's not going to be significant compared to, what you expected when you were first starting. And so I think, especially venture capital has a lot of just predatory kind of ways of creating warrants or side agreements or these things that essentially if founders and companies don't hit certain metrics or they're not able to grow at a certain level, they end up having to give up more equity than they expected. So I think our reason to not raise venture was very deliberate. We knew that we needed a certain amount of capital to grow the business, but we also knew that we needed time to learn the business in our own way and not be on somebody else's venture schedule, which is also another con. When you raise money, you are expected to kind of grow and deliver results on somebody else's timeline because it's somebody else's money. What we did was we raised angel, which is basically high net worth individuals, small funds, syndicates of people coming together to invest. And that was something that, I didn't know was even possible. One of my kind of early mentors reached out to me and was like, look, you can grow this business and raise capital. You don't have to raise venture. You can raise angel and you can have a little bit more flexibility. You can get the time that you need to build the business, but you can be more than just a neighborhood cafe. And that conversation was really important to me because before that, I was like, I don't want to raise money because I don't want to ever give up control. The control, the ability to do things our way, to be able to have the credibility as a brand, those things are all possible when it's my brother and I kind of, in the trenches every day. That doesn't happen when ABC Capital comes in and makes everything look shiny, but now, they really tell you what you can and can't do. So we raised an angel round of $1 million. It was very, very difficult at that time because we don't come from that world. We don't come from a family with, connections or, people call friends and family. I'm like, what family do you have that's helping you raise around? Cause, I tried. No, I didn't even try. I was just like, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? Like it wasn't even a conversation, so there's moments where you have to really think outside of what you've been conditioned to believe through media and all this stuff about, hey, raise a friends and family round or, go pitch these. It's really hard. I remember my brother and I were very up and down during that process because you'd get rejected by somebody and they tell you this, the reason why they're not investing in you. And you're like, I didn't even think that was something that I could get rejected for. Does that make sense? Like they're telling you things about your business that may or may not be true, but you're just not thinking about it that way, and it can be very demoralizing. Yeah, I have a lot of examples. I'm just trying to sort through kind of which ones I can say and which ones I can't. I have 2 examples that I'll share, and I'd love to get these cut up so that I can share them on my social media because I remember how demoralized I felt. So I had a chance to pitch the founder of one of the most notorious kind of DTC companies, a company that launched early, went public, is almost like an iconic direct-to-consumer company in many ways. And I remember pitching him, and he had a friend with him, and they were just like, they were interested in meeting, and his friend was like, hey, I'm a customer of KCC. I actually come here quite often. I was like, great, like this is exciting. Like this might be huge. And the entire meeting, they just like negged me and were just completely disinterested and just like were giving me all the reasons why this business would not work. And I was like, I didn't know what to think, besides being completely demoralized. And I didn't take it that personally because their attitude was just very dismissive. And it just, I was like, all right, these guys aren't interested. I can move on. And this guy, the founder, tweeted a couple weeks later, he's like, I really wish someone would start like a chai cafe. Wouldn't that be a great concept in America? And I was like,
what?
I was like, what? And I always remember that experience because in that moment, I felt like we had the worst company in the world, and I felt like we had the crappiest, small little cafe in the world. This year, we're projected to be an 8-figure brand. And I'm like, oh yeah, it wasn't the demoralizing experience that I thought it was. It was just a learning experience. So that was one that, as a takeaway for all young people or just people raising money in general, you can't let one experience kind of define your entire journey. The second experience that I have, this was another one of those just like formative fundraising experiences. I had a small family office. Basically, they're super interested. They have this text from this guy. It's like, hey, we're in for X amount of money. And it was, significant, mid 6 figures. He's like, we're in. We just want to have a call with our team. Let's set it up and get it started. And I was like, great. And on that call, one person from their team, again, was just like completely negging the entire business. You guys have a commodity business. Anybody could do this on Amazon. Like there's nothing special about this. Community can't scale this. And I was like, okay, like, all right, I'm not going to, you just got to listen in those moments. And again, feeling very demoralized. Obviously, they didn't invest. And I remember going from thinking, wow, we're going to have, X amount of money on our cap table committed to now being like, okay, well, that just completely evaporated, and the reasons that these people were not investing were not good reasons. There was just in their own head about what, they thought the business was. And I use those examples as reminders for anybody thinking about fundraising or going back out to fundraise that, one experience doesn't define the outcome of your raise or the outcome of your company. And I think I'll end with not having to fundraise or not caring about fundraising is the most powerful and empowering thing that I think founders can really dial into. Currently, we're in a position where we don't need to fundraise. We have we've built a healthy cash balance. We've been profitable for the last 4 months. And of course, everyone's reaching out. All the venture funds are reaching out now, and a lot of notable people are reaching out to invest. And, we're not being dismissive of it, but I think we are, as founders, my brother and I are understanding this is where the true leverage is not needing to raise and being able to take capital on your own terms, because that's what, builds a long-term business.
That is so impressive. I mean, I worked in a couple of startups, and one of my CEO actually got let go by the board. So you have to be careful about a lot of stuff. But I want to ask one more question. So we both come from South Asian family, and I was raised here, and especially in our families, they expect us to be doctors and engineers. We're both software engineers. But a lot of times, we kind of isolate our dreams, which might be being a singer or being a podcaster. And it is really difficult to do something you love and also make your parents proud, right? And for you and your brother, you're both entrepreneurs. And I'm sure it took a long time for you guys to actually get to that point where your parents might be they'll be fine. They're doing well. How did you deal with your parents, or if you had to deal with your parents, questioning your decisions of being entrepreneurs, or for you, being an artist, and to now, how do they feel about your journey?
Yeah, I mean, very real question. I could probably, I know I could speak about this for hours. We went through, I think, what everyone in every traditional kind of immigrant family goes through, which was parents doubting, wondering, nagging, if you will, just being very kind of confused at the path that I chose as as elder sibling, and then, that my brother ended up choosing. I will say I give my parents a lot of credit. They've never been forceful with me in other ways that I've seen in my own community, where, it's no, you are doing this, I'm signing you up for law school or whatever. It's that pressure from my parents was never there. They were definitely confused and unhappy, and, comparing me to whoever, golden boy in the community was doing whatever. And, I'm not going to say anything, but yeah, there was that, but my parents never forced my brother and I to do anything. And I give them a lot of credit for that. And I don't know where that came from. I think they just, they understood that in this country, you can't really do that. Or they understood that my child's happiness is probably worth more than, their occupation, and just having that foresight to not be forceful or, nasty about those things. I give my parents a lot of credit. I have a theory on this, but essentially I think what's happened to our generation is that so many of us were just kind of conditioned to take what our parents told us and do, the things that they told us or that they wanted us, or that expectation was so heavy that a lot of folks in our generation never really had a chance to critically think for themselves and to really actually think about, what do I want for me? Not for other people. What do I want for me? And as a result, can I discern when something is actually good for me or bad for me? Do I have the ability to actually critically think outside of the expectations levied by my family or by my community? And again, I think the way, we grew up, the way we were raised, things were tough. And so I think critical thinking was the only thing that we did have was I had to think about, well, if I want to afford this, what do I need to do? I need to go work. Or if I want to, go do this music thing, but I don't want my parents to find out, I got to find a way to put all that together. And it was just always being independent of their expectations from a very young age. I think anybody can do that if they really want to. It takes some kind of reconditioning for a lot of people in our community, but you have to be independent of your family or your community's expectations. And I think the way to remind yourself of this is to look back through people in your family, uncles, cousins, aunties, people that just never had a chance to be themselves because they just let the weight of the expectations kind of crush them, and that was just a life that I wasn't willing to lead. And so grateful for my parents for never being forceful, but also fully keep my parents accountable for never really believing what was happening until now, where it's last 3-4 years, it's been, a hockey stick of growth, and they can kind of see what's happening. And today, obviously, they're extremely proud. We were in the New York Times yesterday, and, my mom she got more text than I did, about it. My dad was I was getting out of the gym, and, so-and-so was texting me about it. I think the feedback that they get from their community, right, the people that matter to them, their friends, their family, like they're seeing so much that they're like, wow, well, something has to be going on. And we take a lot of joy in that. I think, for my brother and I, the biggest joy and the biggest upside of building this company has just been to be able to share this with our parents, and to be able to share multiple cafe locations, or just like, oh, like my mom texted me, like, my friend sent me a screenshot of Mindy Kaling at your cafe, like, is this real? Like, did she come? I was like, yeah, I guess, like, yes, it's Ma's real, but like, my mom gets to be a part of that. I think she's really excited about those moments. I think that's like, giving your parents that is very special. Because you can give them money, and you guys know all this, like, money doesn't solve a lot of things. You can give them time, they're always going to want more time. But if you can give them this sense of accomplishment, and the sense of like, wow, we, took a lot of risks for our kids to be here, and they did something that was meaningful, I think that goes a long way. So I could talk about this all day, but I think I'll always say, do not let the expectations or the, responsibilities of family and community crush who you really are, because you don't get to do life again, and you don't get to reset those expectations once you're, in your 20s and 30s. It just becomes really hard. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
That is so powerful, and takes a lot of guts to not let the expectations of community crush you. I know we're only here for an hour, but if people want to find you, reach out to you, like, where can they find you?
Yeah, come to Kolkata Chai, get some chai. I am
Yes.
available on social media across everything. My handle is the same. It's Ani Hustles, AniHustles. And folks can always go to the Kolkata Chai website, hit the contact form. It'll find its way to me somehow, some way. Yeah, it's the best way.
Cool.
It's perfect, man. Thanks once again for your time, Ani.
Absolutely.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to our podcast till now. I hope it added value in your life. And if it did, please subscribe to our channel. It will help us grow and bring more incredible guests. Thank you.